All right, happy Saturday, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. It's a beautiful day here in Connecticut, where I live, and thanks to all of you for taking the time out on uh, a beautiful day. I hope it is wherever you live. And there's a lot of webinars going around. So I don't know what are you thinking as you look at this webinar. So I hope you are someone like this kid out here and not someone like this. And hopefully you'll find this webinar helpful. And I'm here to share. I'm here to educate. Hopefully answer some questions towards the end. And thanks for the introduction from Knowledge Hut, a little bit more about myself. So I guess I would call myself a practitioner of delivery frameworks, mechanisms, and those kind of things over the years. So um, Agile has kind of become really popular most recently, and I would consider myself an agile transformation leader and consultant. But right after college, I got into technology and did a lot of project program portfolio management, which I did for a substantial part of my life, both in IT and non-IT, across the world, across different industries, as you can see on this slide. And I am on LinkedIn. I think there's a typo here. It's Kumar dash Manu, not Kumar Manu. So please feel free to connect with me. In fact, let me correct this right away. So feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn, stay in touch. So without much further ado, so about agile, right? Why is agile important? Why is there so much of buzz about agile? Now I don't know the participants here. What's your background in agile versus historically we had used the PMI methodology a lot. So I don't know what your backgrounds are. So one question that frequently comes at why is agile become so important in today's world? And the short answer is that we live in the age of software and digital disruption. So as we see going back in history, in the 1700s, many of us must have read about it. We had the Industrial Revolution, followed by age of steam and railways, and steel and heavy engineering, and so on and so forth. In today's world, we live in a world of software and digital, all right? And we all know that. Everything, every company is a software company in disguise. A lot of the instruments that we use are basically software instruments. And if you look around, like Tesla, for example, is a car. It's supposed to be a car, but really it's a computer on wheels, right? And similarly, most of the other cars, the new version they're following, Tesla, GM is coming out with all electric, and electric essentially embeds a lot of computer software and those kind of things in there, right? You have rocket ships going all the way from the moon to the Mars planet, and they are fitted with so many onboard computers, right? So, and all computers have software. So really, software underpins a lot of whatever goes on around the world today, and the speed at which things need to happen is much faster than they used to happen in the past. All right. So as you can see, there's billions of users who are using millions of apps, as opposed to if you rewind a few years in the age of mainframe and mini computer. Give me 1 second. In the age of mainframe and mini computer, the number of users were in the millions, and the number of apps across the world were about just in the thousands, right? So we graduated from mainframes to internet, client server, and PC, and users of computers and software increased from thousands to tens of thousands. But now we have billions of users using millions of apps, right? There's an app for everything, and everything is an app, right? All companies are software companies in disguise. I used to work for an insurance company, and what I learned there was that the biggest department there was the software department. And why was that? Everything right from underwriting a policy. So, for example, you go out to buy an auto policy. All you need to do is enter your name, your address, your driver's license, and that's pretty much it. The company will automatically, the systems in the company will automatically pull in data from various different sources and calculate what your risk is, what kind of premium you should be paying, and basically deliver the policy electronically to you. So that's the importance of software and technology in today, and we all know that, right? We all live with technology day in, day out, and that's really happening all across the world. And we already talked about the example of Tesla, Amazon, Netflix, right? You can watch videos uh, on any device of your liking, right? So what does all of that tell us? What that tells us that we live in an age of innovation at hyper speed, right? So uh, technologies are coming out at breakneck speed, and there are companies in this world who are new as well as old. So the new companies include Netflixes, Amazons, and Teslas of the world, which have the luxury of kind of having built themselves from ground up. So they are what I call born agile. But there's still a lot of companies, for example, insurance companies, banks, who have been here around in the world for like 70, 80, 100, 150 years, right? So they don't have the luxury to kind of start like Amazon and Netflix did, right? They have so much legacy baggage, both in terms of the systems as well as the culture and their substructures and all that kind of stuff, and the way of working. So these kind of companies have a challenge on how to be agile. These are the companies who were very successful in the years since they were founded, but now they are threatened by the fact that they are still saddled with old ways of doing business. One example is multi-year old program cycles, right? So how do you accelerate when your culture, your structure, your systems does not allow? How can you compete with Amazon of the world, right? How can a Walmart compete with Amazon? How can a GM build out new products as fast as Tesla can deliver new features into their cars, right? How can you execute like a startup? So those are the questions that I see when I look around. A lot of these old, large, legacy, successful companies are facing. They're asking themselves, they're asking consultants, and really what they want to be is an agile business, right? They want to execute like a startup. But that's not easy, right? When you think about, if you look at these large companies with so much of baggage, where do you start, right? How do you start being agile? And a lot of companies, at least visually, they try to make a point by redoing office space. And we have all been there, right? You would have seen a lot of remodeling going around in these old buildings where you're tearing down walls, you're having glass walls instead, or open spaces. You're bringing in brightly colored furniture and that kind of stuff, right? And then the team start doing I call it doing Scrum and Kanban, right? You take a training course or you call a consultant and you start doing agile. But in my mind, that is kind of just part of the story, right? That's not something that's the overall solution. Being agile is much more than that, right? Being agile is about the philosophy behind agile, of being predictable, right? Agile is all about how can I be more predictable in my delivery. It's not just about speed, it's also about predictability, right? Being agile is about being agile as a whole, as the whole company, not just one team being agile, but all teams in a company being agile, including vendors being agile. So how do you make it all work together, right? How do you inculcate agile principles, values, mindset at an individual level? Because ultimately it's the individuals who do all the work, right? So how can you be agile at an individual level so that you can feel agile in the culture of the whole organization, right? And when you talk of culture, of course, culture is all about the way people think, what their mindset is, what values they have, and what principles they have. So, so what I'm trying to get to is that transforming any legacy organization to being an agile organization is not easy. It has a lot of these bits and pieces, which includes not just process, but also people and culture and that kind of stuff, right? And the problem is that how do we address that? So in response to that, what happened several years back, a bunch of people got together into in a resort in Salt Lake, Snowbird, Utah, I think, and that's where they came about with what is known as the Agile Manifesto, and that's where they basically documented certain values and principles. What does it mean to be agile? And we are not going to talk about that in this session, but we cover that in some of the courses that we offer at SAFE. So in the Agile Manifesto, these concepts of what are the critical success factors of uh, successful execution in businesses consist of, right? So those items were documented, and that's where concepts like Scrum, Kanban started taking shape. Over time, what happened was that in business circles, there was a realization that it's not enough to be agile at a team level. How do you ensure that multiple teams work together so that a company as a whole is agile? And that's where larger scaled frameworks like Scaled Agile came into being. So conceptually, now, this is important to understand. So imagine a company which has, let's say, it's a small company. It has just three teams. All right. So team one, team two, and team three. Let's say they are all agile. Let's say all, they've all read the book. They all are following Scrum methods and all that stuff. Team A has a sprint length that is, let's say this is 2 weeks. All right. 7 days. Times 2, 15 days, so like 10 working days, right? So let's say this is 2 weeks, team A is following that iteration. Let's say team B is also a Scrum team, but they say that, oh, 10 days is too less for us. We want to follow a 12-day iteration. So they have a 12-day iteration and so on and so forth. Team C, they are saying we want a 15-day iteration. So this is 15-day and so on and so forth. So individually, each team is agile. They are following all the ceremonies. They are on a cadence. However, they are not synchronized. So when they have to work with each other, the soonest that these teams will come together will be at this point, and this team, God knows when this team will come together with the remaining two. So the point is that in a large organization, you need to not just make sure that every team is agile, you also need to have some kind of a structure for all those teams to work with each other, right? And the other concept is that you have to also ensure that all pieces of work at the team level are rolling up to one higher level, right? Because that's the only way you can manage large companies. You need to have a bigger picture view, and then you break it down into smaller chunks, which are finally distributed at the team level into the smallest pieces of work, right? And all those pieces of work need to be coordinated And by coordination, I mean that at frequent intervals, all the teams should come together and align. And if they start to deviate, then you pull it back. Okay. And then they go start working, and again they deviate, they pull it back. They start working again, deviate, pull it back. So over time, you are pulling things back from a deviation at regular intervals. Now imagine if you were not doing that. What happens is that multiple teams, all these teams, they are working independently on their own. Over time, the deviation keeps growing and growing. And when you finally get together, imagine the days of waterfall. When you do integration testing, that's when you discover the disparity between multiple teams. So these are the problems that the people at SAFE realize, and they try to solve it by coming up with this framework, which really brings to life this philosophy of not just having cadence, but also synchronization. These are very important concepts. So cadence means something that happens at a regular interval. And cadence brings predictability. Cadence is like a heartbeat, right? Your heart beats predictability every whatever 1 or 2 seconds or whatever, right? So you want that predictability in the system. So every team should have a cadence, but that's not enough. Cadence without synchronization is not enough. All these teams should also be synchronized. So what that means is that all the sprint lengths should be the same. They should start and end at the same time, because if they are staggered, then you miss out on synchronization. Okay. And SAFE provides a framework to enable all of this, which is why it is becoming so popular in organization. So talking about that, what is SAFE? What is the framework? So the framework is freely available at scaledagileFramework.com. You can go there. This whole picture you'll be able to see there. Every icon here is clickable. If you wanted to learn everything about SAFE on your own, you could very well go there, click on each one of these, and a web page will open. There'll be a pretty good enough description of each one of these items here, and you could study the whole thing on your own. But in reality, imagine all these icons here, everything is clickable. It's very, very comprehensive. It's more comprehensive than anyone could handle, and it's easy to get lost, which is why in SAFE we kind of have a structured process to kind of go through it, which I'm going to talk about in a minute. But coming back to what the framework is, so one thing that the framework does is define the competencies. So if an organization wants to be agile, what does it mean? What competencies should the organization have? So organizations should have agility at the organization level. An organization should have uh, lean portfolio management. An organization should have agility at the solution delivery enterprise level, and at the product level, at the team level, and an organization should have continuous learning culture. And we kind of go through each one of these in detail in our various courses. So that's one aspect of the framework. The other aspect of this framework is prescribing what roles are needed in an agile enterprise. And here are some examples. So you have the Scrum Master role, you have the product owner role, you have the release train engineer role, you have the product manager role, you have the solution architect, epic owner, and so on and so forth. So SAFE essentially is pretty prescriptive about what kind of roles are needed in an agile organization, how do they interact with each other, what should their role descriptions look like, what should their responsibilities be, and so on and so forth. Okay. Third thing is the framework prescribes certain operational practices. So things like uh, continuous delivery, continuous exploration, continuous integration, continuous deployment, DevOps. So you may have heard of all these terms, not necessarily experienced this. So SAFE essentially brings it all together into one framework and explains how it all interrelates. All right. The fourth thing that the framework include is a prescription on ceremonies. So what ceremonies are recommended for an enterprise to be agile? So one example is, excuse me. So one example is PI planning. The other example is inspect and adapt. Again, I won't go into it in detail, but uh, there's a lot that goes behind it. So PI planning, for example, there's within SAFe, we have a whole detailed 2-day agenda. Hour by hour, we talk about, okay, what should happen in what sequence, who should do what. So it's like out of the box prescription for how to get started on Agile. Now, again, we can't say that one size fits all. Obviously, every company is different. Um, and you can't say that it's directly applicable, but at least there's a starting point, right? It really accelerates large enterprise's journey to have something to start with rather than trying to figure something out on your own, right? And then there is the implementation roadmap that you are 100-year-old organization. You got a mandate from the CEO that you have to become agile. Where do you start? So in SAFe, we also have a sort of a roadmap for that. What is the first step you take? What do you do next? And so on and so forth. All right. So in summary, in a nutshell, the framework includes competencies, team constructs and roles, operational practices, ceremonies, and the implementation roadmap. Okay. You might be having a lot of questions about this, and I'll be happy to take them after I go through these slides. Uh, Moving on, so these are again, so this is an example of an answer to a question. Okay, I agree that okay, SAFe is a good framework, but it's too detailed for me. Where do I start? Right? I can't do it all to start with. So what we say is that, okay, you can start with just the basics, and this slide just lays out the basics. So to be agile, any company should have leaders and people who understand safe, lean, agile principles. And we discuss these in great amount of detail in our courses. The other thing is that you should have agile teams. What is an agile team? An agile team is a team that has a product owner and a scrum master in addition to the developers and testers and QA. All right. The other thing we need is trains, agile release train. Then we need to have cadence and synchronization. I already talked about that. You need to have the PI planning event, which is an event that happens every 10 weeks, right? That's the heartbeat of the system. You need to have uh, an understanding of customer centricity, DevOps, and release on demand. I'm not going to talk more about that in this session. And you need to have system demos every 2 weeks, and you need to have an inspect and adapt event every 10 weeks, and so on and so forth. So again, it's sort of a prescription. If an organization is wondering how do I get become agile, you go to the doctor. The doctor gives you a prescription. So this is the prescription for SAFe. That here's where you start. These are the 10 things that you need to do at the bare minimum to have agile at scale. All right. I talked about the PI planning event. This is an example agenda that is provided by SAFe, and it's a two-day agenda, and there are different time slots, and specific roles have different roles, different responsibilities in each of these time slots. All right. So once the PI planning event happens, then during execution, again, there's a bunch of ceremonies that are prescribed within SAFe. And again, we covered these in a lot more detail in our classes. This is the PI planning event. After that, we have a bunch of other ceremonies that are very essential to keep things moving throughout those 10 weeks of a program increment. And it ends with inspect and adapt. Okay. And there are some events even at the team level, which are mentioned here. So what differentiates SAFe from other versions of Agile is that SAFe, as the name says, right, it is scaled. So we don't just talk about Agile at a team level. These are all team level events. What differentiates SAFe is one higher level up events, which is the art events, the most important of which is the PI planning event. Okay. So as a result of all this thought that has gone into the framework to help large legacy organizations become agile, uh, scaled agile has earned the the acceptance and adoption of the market. So this was a study that Gartner conducted. Now it's a little bit dated, but now the numbers I suspect may be even better looking for SAFe. So as you can see, SAFe has at least 5 times as many adopters as the others, right? There are a bunch of other frameworks, but uh, they are much less popular. And when you go with less popular frameworks, you are basically, when you hire new people, you have to teach them your new framework. When people quit, then they have to learn new frameworks, and it's just not easy, right? When you're working with your vendors may not necessarily know your framework. So there is a benefit of using a widely known framework like SAFe, which is why more and more companies are adopting it. And you can see that in the market, right? That goes without saying. And SAFe has evolved over the years, and it's very comprehensive. SAFe, the company Scaled Agile Incorporated that owns the framework. Uh, they are a for-profit company. They're based in Denver, Colorado, and they have done a lot of hard work. They have their people constantly read books, 100 and counting. They take continuous feedback from implementations, and they loop that into the framework, and they evolve the framework over time. It started as version 1.0 in 2011. 10 years since then, they have now we are at version 5.1. So that says that I like to joke about it. When you're with SAFe, you're really in safe hands because it's an ever evolving framework. You don't need to kind of read these 100 books or have a lot of experience. You get it all kind of pre-cooked, served on a platter to you, which at least gives you a starting point. One example is in the latest version of SAFe, they included the concept of customer centricity and design thinking, which is a fairly newly popular concept. It wasn't there in the past, but they keep doing these things. As they evolve the framework, they see what is becoming more and more relevant in the world, and they improve the framework along with that. So as a result, you see this is just an example of the popularity SAFe has. Again, you see numbers in thousands and hundreds of thousands. And since you're here, I presume you're interested in knowing more about it because you've heard about it from somewhere. And and one thing that SAFe offers is uh, a lot of different a lot of different certifications, and they are based on roles. As you can see, there's a leading SAFe for teams, Scrum Master, and so on and so forth. So depending on where you are in your career journey, in your aspirations, in the position you have in your organization, you can there is a certification for you, all right, and SAFe offers that. It is very widely accepted. If you look at the job boards, more and more I see people are asking, companies are asking by name that we want SAFe certified Scrum Masters, for example. So I'm increasingly seeing that. um, Moving on. excuse me. So this is just an example of the role-based nature of the certification, right? So again, the framework is very comprehensive, but and I said, right, that it's easy to get lost in the details. But if you are operating at this level, then a better certification for you is the Scrum Master certification and vice versa, or the POPM. The release train certification applies here. Lean portfolio management applies here. The leading safe is kind of all encompassing. It's a it's a broad-based certification that covers everything, but not in great detail. It's a little bit of everything. Okay. And I also talked about the fact that when companies are wanting to transform, there is a roadmap for that. And the roadmap includes uh, training different people depending on the role at different steps in the process. And trained, there's a role called SPC who can guide an organization through the process. So that's all about SAFE, the framework and the company and the certifications. And this is me in beautiful Connecticut. Please connect with me on LinkedIn, and I am open for any questions now.
This question is by Pankaj Sharma. He says, "Can you please touch upon the cadence and sync in SAFe?"
Cadence and synchronization. All right. So cadence basically is, by definition, right? Cadence is something that happens on a rhythm, right? And the example I use to explain cadence is, for example, let's say you have a rental property somewhere, right? And you have to collect rent, and you also have to see if there are any repairs needed or something like that. So let's say I just show up randomly at my apartment anytime that I'm free, and sometimes I see the renter is there, sometimes there's nobody at home, and that kind of stuff, right? So it's totally unpredictable. Alternately, I could have an arrangement with the renter that I'm going to show up at the apartment third Friday of every month, and we are going to collect your rent, and at the same time you will have the opportunity to tell me if there is any water leakage somewhere or some repairs you need to have. So there's predictability on both ends, right? So so I have a cadence third Friday of every month. Cadence means that there's a rhythm, there's an expectation, there's predictability, and that leads to better outcomes, right? So that is cadence. Synchronization is, for example, let's say me and two of my friends decide to go on a road trip, right? And we all go in separate cars and we are driving. And let's say I'm on a cadence that I'm going to take a stop every 1 hour. And Pankaj is on a cadence. Let's say he wants to, or let me not take a time metric. Let's say I take a stop every 50 miles, and Pankaj decides to take a stop. He loves to drive, so he takes a stop every 75 miles, right? And another friend takes a stop every 20 miles. He's a frequent stopper. He stops every 20 miles. So there is a cadence. Each one of us has an individual cadence. But assuming, let's say, imagine a world where there are no cell phones. If we keep our own cadence, we won't synchronize, right? We won't be able to exchange notes. We won't be able to meet each other till the final destination, right? And uh, we may not learn from each other that, hey, one person saw something on the way, wants to share something with the rest of the friends. That won't happen. So there are two concepts. Cadence is the concept of being rhythmic and predictable, and synchronization is kind of everything coming together at regular intervals. Does that answer your question? And what happens in, just to add to that, the way it comes to life in a safe company, the cadence is implemented through these iterations. Um, these iterations. So this is the cadence, right? So every 2 weeks, a new iteration is starting. So that's your cadence. And synchronization is every 10 weeks, all the teams synchronize with each other. What other questions can I answer?
Great. Thank you, Kumar. Pankaj, I hope that answers your question. Please do type in if you have a follow-up. So, Kumar, the next question is, in principle, what makes SAFe more popular than other scaled agile frameworks, particularly versus Scrum? Less. So he means to say, how is SAFe more popular than Scrum and other agile frameworks?
So there's two things, right? If you look at certifications, so there's the CSM certification from Certified Scrum Master from Scrum Alliance, right? For I think so. So that addresses agile at just the team level. So this is the team level. This is the team level. So so non-safe certifications address agile at just the team level. They don't know about the concept of PI planning. They don't know how I interact with multiple teams and so on and so forth. So their mission is, I have a team of 5 people. How do I make it high performing? How do I run the ceremonies? How do I do sprint planning, sprint retro, all that good stuff? So, right. So a scrum master who's only learned about being agile at a team level will be a great scrum master at the team level, but we all know that a team alone cannot do anything, right? In theory, we say that a team size should be what, 5 to 11 members. So uh, it's very rare in today's companies that a single team can achieve anything. There's always dependencies on other teams, right? Which is where scaling becomes important. A scrum master in a safe organization learns how to interact not just with his or her own team members, but also with other teams, and also in the bigger picture of the agile release train or the program. And that is the focus of scale. That's why we have the prefix scaled in front of agile. And the reason, if your question was reason why Safe is popular as opposed to Spotify and some of these things, I mean, it's just one of those maybe. So for sure, the framework is much more solid. That's for sure. It's so comprehensive that it's unbelievable in some way. In some ways, that's point number one. The other thing is that yeah, I mean, they have the people at Scaled Agile have approached it from a lot of different angles. It's not that it's not just that they created a framework, put it on a website, and left it. Okay, you guys just read it and learn about it yourself. They basically laid out all these series of certifications to help people understand it in a structured manner. So typically there are 2-day classes which are in a workshop setting. These are live online classes where people actually get the opportunity to absorb all the concepts, discuss it with the trainer as well as other participants, and really get a sense of it, as opposed to just being handed over a web link or a book and being on your own. So that's the other reason for the success of Scaled Agile. Uh, and Third could be just marketing. I mean, the company is owned by a private equity firm, and they are applying their own principles to be agile in becoming better and better over time, and bringing and communicate those betterments to the world. So it's a mixture of all these things. Why Scaled Agile is the most popular.
Great. Thank you very much for that, Kumar. Sachin, I hope that answers your question. So we have one last question for now, which is by Kaushik. The question is, what safe certification will be most appropriate and kickoff point for a senior manager who is involved in managing multiple accounts and the accounts are aligned to agile delivery.
So I presume you're referring to maybe you belong to a consulting organization where you have multiple clients, each client is an account. So for that one, I'm trying to get to that slide. So this is the leading safe certification, and the name of this certification itself is called SA Safe Agilist. So this is the one that gives you a big picture of the whole framework. It talks a little bit about portfolio management. It'll talk a little bit about PI planning. It'll talk a little bit about managing teams, product ownership. It's a little bit of everything. So for middle managers and senior leaders as well, uh, I would recommend the first course to be taken up is Leading Safe. People who are kind of working more at the team level, it is sufficient to just straight away go for the Scrum Master certification and then over time graduate, or depending on your role, it could even be the POPM. And over time, then kind of as your budget allows, you can go over to Leading Safe and LPM and some of these things. And in fact, that's what even the our roadmap says, that Leading Safe is the first recommended training because that gives the big picture view of things, of the framework.
Great. Thank you, Kumar. I think that is it with the questions now. Sachin Sachin is the person who gave us a second question, which said what makes SAFe more popular than other agile frameworks. So he
Yeah.
again replies saying, I've been working in project program management capacity, having working exposure to Scrum framework, being part of the agile team as
As
a
a BA.
BA.
Yes, now I see
Yeah,
it.
I'm also, yeah,
So will this be more
yes,
recommended?
Kumar.
Probably 5.1. I'm also interested in, I've been working in. So what I've seen, Sachin and others, typically business analysts, they in safe to the POPM role. So for business analysts, if you ask me, that's what I would recommend. So this is probably the best course to go for. For junior project managers or developers who want to get into uh, kind of the management sort of roles, I would recommend Scrum Master. And program managers who are leading multiple teams and that kind of stuff, for them it is these two certifications. The difference between these two is that the release train engineer is a day-to-day hands-on execution role. It's actually delivering on a release train, whereas this is more of a strategic role. This is about like transformation lead or PMO lead. Those kind of people are more appropriate for this training. But again, coming back to you, Sachin, if you are a BA, then you would enjoy taking the POPM course because it's all about how do you structure your products, how do you define features and stories, and how do you prioritize them, how do you document them, that kind of stuff. But I'm just reading through your comments. I'm more on program management capacity. So again, depends on the size of your program. So I would recommend if you're totally new to Agile, you could start with the Scrum Master and then you can then think about the release train because release train certification has a lot more stringent requirements. So it's a little bit difficult to get to. but Scrum Master is a great one to get started with before moving on to release train engineer. But CSM is different from SSM. CSM is not, and you know what? I have so many classes where people who have already had CSM certification and then they take the SSM course, and without fail, the feedback I get is that it was an eye opener because CSM does not have concept of PI planning, for example, right? And if you have not done PI planning and you land in an organization that is safe compliant, then you'll be totally lost. And the CSM certification does not cover that. The SSM covers that in detail. And things like inspect and adapt. So so those are the differences, Sachin, and I think we need a longer conversation with you because I think you have a lot of questions and we don't want to hold everyone, and you have certain detailed questions. But yeah, I see where your needs are, and we'll be happy to help you with them.